The life of a professional wrestler is sort of ridiculous when you stop and think about it. Grown men and women who travel the world in spandex, risking life and limb to win fictional titles.
I gotta do a loser co-signs a small business loan for Coco Beware match.
I have a loser has to act out 50 Shades of Grey with Kamala in a YMCA locker room match.
But it's a career path that demands great sacrifice and total devotion. Here's Bret Hart wrestling at the 1990 Survivor Series. His brother Dean died of kidney disease the day before this pay-per-view. Nobody offered him the night off, and Pat Patterson actually told him, "You look like somebody died," while in the elevator before the show. Here's Jim Ross commentating at the 1998 Capital Carnage pay-per-view in London. His mother unexpectedly passed away the day before this event. He learned the news when his plane landed and still called the show. The average WWE wrestler is on the road over 250 days a year. For stars needed to do PR and promotional work, that number can be a lot higher.
I got home this weekend and it was the first time in 63 jam-packed days.
With that schedule, it's no surprise that so many wrestlers choose to date their coworkers. Who else could understand that type of lifestyle and dedication to a job? Of the 30 competitors in the 2019 Women's Royal Rumble match, at least 24 are currently or have been in a publicly reported relationship with another figure in the wrestling business. For the Men's Royal Rumble, I count 12 out of the 30. This phenomena is so common in the wrestling industry, it's almost surprising to see a wrestler date someone who isn't in the business. Ultimately, some of these relationships lead to marriage, most just fade away without much comment. But occasionally, one blows up in such a spectacular fashion that everyone stops and takes notice. In 2005, Amy Dumas's 5-year relationship with boyfriend Matt Hardy ended due to a very public affair with fellow wrestler Adam Copeland. The fallout of this breakup resulted in the WWE firing Hardy, but fan outrage led to his return in one of the most memorable work shoots of all time. This is the third video in a 3-part series covering the Matt Hardy, Edge, and Lita love triangle. If you haven't already or are new to my channel, I highly recommend watching the first 2 videos in this series to see a detailed breakdown of everything that happened up to this point. In mid-2004, Matt Hardy, Lita, and Kane entered into an on-screen love triangle from hell that more closely resembled the ridiculous plot of some soap opera than a wrestling angle. This storyline ended with Kane impregnating Lita and eventually marrying her against her will, and Hardy was written off television in order to receive knee surgery. Although separated in storyline, behind the scenes, Matt and Lita remained in a serious romantic relationship that had been ongoing for several years. The two met at an indie show in 1999 prior to Lita signing with the WWE. They hit it off as friends right away, but didn't start dating until about a year later. And in February of 2001, their real-life relationship was brought to television. The two bonded over their love of wrestling and their shared journey to live out their dreams. And in later interviews, both have actually spoken pretty positively about their relationship at the time. Jeff Hardy reported that he thought Matt and Lita would stay together forever, and actually flat out refused to take part in an angle that would have required him to kiss Lita, threatening to walk away from the company if necessary. While Matt was at home rehabbing his knee, Lita remained on the road as Kane's on-screen wife, and took part in another ridiculous storyline involving the death of her unborn son at the hands of Gene Snitsky. Professional wrestlers are independent contractors, and with the exception of airfare, they're usually responsible for their own expenses and transportation. A typical loop might involve a 700-mile road trip over the weekend. So for financial reasons and mental well-being, wrestlers rarely travel alone. With Matt on the injured list, Lita began riding with other travel partners, one of which was Adam Copeland, better known to WWE fans as Edge. Edge made his WWE debut in 1998 as a loner with a lost soul who entered through the crowd and hung out in empty subway stations. His on-screen brother Christian was introduced later in the year, and the two joined Gangrel to create the Brood, a clan of quasi-vampires. Gangrel eventually betrayed Edge and Christian, dissolving the group, and the two continued as what quickly became a hugely successful tag team, morphing into a couple of Bill and Ted-esque comedy heels in the process. Their TLC matches against the Hardys and Dudleys raised the bar in terms of risk-taking, and are some of the greatest matches of all time. After 7 World Tag Championship reigns, the team imploded in 2001, and Edge began to establish himself as a singles competitor. However, following a 2002 no DQ match with Eddie Guerrero, Edge began experiencing numbness in his neck and arms on a regular basis, which would eventually worsen and result in neck surgery that sidelined him for over a year. He made his return in 2004, turning heel at Taboo Tuesday after abandoning his tag partner Chris Benoit. At the time Edge began traveling with Lita, he was in the middle of a slow slow rise to the main event and was arguably the best heel in the business. Although they'd spent the majority of their on-screen careers as heated rivals, Matt Hardy and Edge were actually close friends behind the scenes. Matt and Lita had even attended Edge's wedding just a month prior in October 2004, and Matt had no problem with Edge and Lita riding together. But after spending long hours in the car over the next weeks and months, Edge and Lita began to grow closer. In a 2017 interview, Lita stated that her neck injury in 2002 forced her to consider her life beyond wrestling for the first time, and she felt disconnected from Matt. Like once their careers were over, there'd be no bond left to hold them together.
He says, oh my God, I'm gonna have to be out for a year. And I go, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about a year. Don't worry about wrestling. And I'm not worried about anything in the immediate future. I just want her to get fixed up so that 20 years from now we can walk around the zoo and eat popcorn.
As she and Edge spent more time alone, they began to connect on a deeper level. Despite how this relationship was later presented on screen, in interviews, Matt and Lita have both downplayed the physicality of this affair, claiming that it was much more of a mental connection. In fact, Lita claims that she and Edge freaked out the first night they kissed, around the same time she tore her ACL in January of 2005, and they took the opportunity to let the relationship cool and reevaluate what they were doing. Matt was first alerted that something might be going on by Edge's wife, who called saying that she discovered a text message to Lita on Edge's phone that read, "I'm going to miss seeing you on the road. Love you." Matt called Edge for an explanation, but he didn't answer. He then called Lita, who wrote it off as just a friendly message. However, she eventually admitted that she and Edge had become close on the road, but still insisted that there was nothing going on. Hardy was upset about this, and the next couple of days were very tense. But as Lita was now also injured and at home with Hardy, his concerns eventually faded away. That is until Valentine's Day, when Matt came home with a number of presents, but Lita hadn't bought him anything. This led Matt to check Lita's phone that night, and he found a missed call from Edge. He confronted her about this discovery, and she again played it off as nothing, but admitted that she was at a crossroads in her life and was unsure about their future. They argued off and on for the next few days, but resolved nothing. At this point, Hardy called Edge and point blank asked him if they were having an affair, which he of course denied. Hardy then warned him to not call or text her again. But what Matt didn't know is Lita had a second cell phone hidden away. She was booked for an appearance and left town for the weekend, leaving the phone turned off. During this time, Edge called and left multiple voicemails, fully laying out his intentions and his feelings towards her. When Lita returned home, she went to bed without checking her messages, and early that morning, Matt discovered the second phone and listened to the voicemails. At that point, all hell broke loose. Matt stormed into the bedroom, ripping the covers off the bed and yelling,
"I'm gonna play a little game called Tell the Fucking Truth."
But not before calling Edge's wife and playing her the messages. Completely enraged, Matt threw Lita out and threatened Edge, who called sobbing and apologizing. Although deeply hurt, Matt still wanted to repair the relationship. He claims to have had multiple conversations with Edge and Lita over the next few days that went nowhere. Fed up, he told Shane McMahon about the affair, resulting in word leaking to the locker room. Matt took down all the photos of Lita around the house and sent word to his webmaster to remove her pictures from his personal website. When a fan noticed the photos were suddenly gone and naturally asked why, Matt replied, "Ask her." Of course, this led to the story breaking. In a world where a retired referee's birthday counts as news, and forgetting to shake someone's hand is considered a scandal, one wrestler stealing another's girlfriend was a pretty big deal. But of course, this is far from the only real-life wrestling love triangle. It's not even the only one involving Matt Hardy. In 1997, Kevin Sullivan essentially booked his own divorce after devising a storyline that saw Chris Benoit begin an affair with his wife, Woman. This on-screen affair soon turned into a real-life romance, and she left Sullivan for Benoit that same year. In 2007, Jeff Jarrett began an affair with Kurt Angle's soon-to-be ex-wife, Karen. After rumors of the affair began to spread, TNA owner Dixie Carter confronted Jarrett, demanding an explanation. Jarrett lied to Dixie, denying the affair, which led to his suspension when the truth was revealed by an anonymous TNA employee who called into the Bubba the Love Sponge radio show. Matt Hardy and his close friends began openly discussing the affair on his message board, which angered WWE management. Even Edge's wife eventually chimed in, trashing Lita and accusing Edge of steroid abuse. Matt was scheduled to return to WWE television on the March 7, 2005 episode of Raw, which originated from Raleigh, North Carolina, but was told by John Laurinaitis to stay home, as the company didn't want his personal life affecting the product. During Edge's match that night, small "you screwed Matt" chants could be heard off and on.
I hate having to hit my head on anything other than a headboard.
And a fan at ringside had a pretty noticeable sign. But Lita returned to TV later in the show to a pretty big pop, and no audible chants at all. Regardless, Matt was pulled from all house shows in the immediate future. Realizing that this conflict was starting to affect his career, he arranged a meeting with Edge and Lita in a hotel room that night in Raleigh. This was the first time he'd seen either of them since he'd discovered the affair. There was a draft coming up, and Matt wanted Edge to move to SmackDown so that he and Lita could work on their relationship. But Edge admitted that he was in love with Lita and didn't want to switch shows. In an attempt to convince the office that he could exist in the same locker room as Edge, Matt showed up to the house show in Fayetteville, North Carolina that he'd been asked not to attend. The next day, Edge discovered that the tires on his rental car had been slashed. Shortly thereafter, John Laurinaitis called, informing Matt that the V1 character had run its course and that he was being released. Matt claims that Joey Abs, formerly of the Mean Street Posse, had a bone to pick with him and spread a rumor that he put a hit out on Edge. But since they couldn't get to him, they vandalized his car instead. From the company's perspective, firing Matt Hardy was probably a pretty easy decision. Edge and Lita were ingrained in ongoing storylines, and removing either of them would have required a creative reshuffle. While Matt had been off television for several months and was an unproven draw as a singles competitor. Additionally, Matt was the one stirring up fans with details of the affair online. Laurinaitis claims that Matt was warned about handling the situation maturely multiple times before his firing. Nevertheless, this time there was a strong and immediate backlash from fans and wrestlers alike.
How could you be sitting at home rehabbing your knee and a month later you lose your girlfriend and your job for doing nothing wrong? You know what I mean?
That is rough.
Yeah, it's the shits.
In later interviews, Edge and Lita reported being completely ostracized in the locker room, and both called this period the most stressful of their careers. The April 18th episode of Raw saw Lita come out to what can only be described as nuclear heat.
Excuse me, we are trying to have a conversation here, people.
The incensed crowd loudly chanted, "You screwed Matt," among other things throughout this segment.
Oh no, this is new.
All right. Don't call her a slut.
Dirt Sheets reported the next day that Lita was shaken by this reaction. Matt issued a statement on his official message board thanking the fans for their support. With Lita continuing to receive an increasingly negative and hostile fan reaction, WWE officials were left with little choice but to either make her the face of the company or turn her heel for the first time in her career. A Gold Rush tournament to determine the #1 contender to Batista's World Heavyweight Championship was announced on the May 2nd, 2005 episode of Raw. 2 weeks later, Edge and Kane faced off in the final round of this tournament. Although Kane had previously kidnapped and arguably raped Lita before forcing her to marry him, the death of their child and their shared pursuit of revenge against abortion enthusiast Gene Snitsky had caused the couple to form an unlikely bond. But in the final moments of this match, Lita betrayed Kane, revealing herself to have colluded with her new lover, Edge. The next week's Raw opened with a long promo, during which Lita ran down Kane's numerous past discrepancies and claimed that she was finally with a real man, which was kinda harsh considering he literally won her in a fight. Edge declared that they owed no one any explanations or apologies. Although this was a kayfabe promo, it was pretty easy to read between the lines. Kane, who broke down in tears watching the monitor backstage, was recast as a sort of on-screen proxy for Hardy and entered into an ill-fated feud with the couple. Lita announced she'd filed for divorce on the next week's Raw, shortly before flushing her wedding ring down the toilet. The week after that, she called out Gene Snitsky to personally thank him for killing her baby. The June 20th episode of Raw saw Lita walk down the aisle on WWE television for the second time in 9 months. Family friend Gene Snitsky recited a sentimental poem to celebrate the occasion.
It's not my fault the things that love can do to us. Just like it's not my fault you had a dead baby in your uterus.
And Lita's vows were particularly heartfelt.
But if falling in love with you makes me a slut, well then I'm proud. I am proud to be the slut of the century.
The crowd turned on this segment almost immediately,
And not a monster.
but lost their minds when a familiar song filled the arena.
If there's anybody here that feels these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, very well then.
Unfortunately, it was all a cruel joke, and instead Kane broke through the ring canvas and ruined the ceremony. On commentary, Jim Ross referred to this event as the most bizarre wedding in WWE history, apparently forgetting that The Undertaker nearly wed Stephanie McMahon while she was strapped to a makeshift crucifix. Kane actually defeated Edge that Sunday at Vengeance, but much like his real-life counterpart, he seemed to have trouble moving on. Following his release, Matt Hardy began to act increasingly unhinged.
And you're going to stay here in this bathroom for the remainder of the day, and you're not getting any food, and you're not getting any water. If you get out of line, I'm going to fucking punch you in the eye. So if you stand here in this bathroom, every time I come in here and have to do a number 2, I'm going to leave it in here and lock the door and make you smell it all day. It's going to be your punishment for the rest of your life.
Redubbing himself Angelic Diablo, a man who lost everything, and discussing the affair at great length with basically anyone with a microphone who asked. He even filmed a detailed reenactment of the breakup, which was released on DVD. The July 11, 2005 episode of Raw featured a rematch between Edge and Kane scheduled for the main event. As Edge walked through the backstage area immediately before the match, he was suddenly attacked by Hardy, who fled out the back door as soon as WWE agents intervened. The show returned from break with no mention of Hardy or anything that just happened, and Edge and Kane had a short match that ended in disqualification due to interference by Gene Snitsky. As Kane and Snitsky brawled through the crowd, Matt Hardy jumped the guardrail, attacking Edge once more. Security swarmed both men, who really did appear to be slugging it out. Finally separated, Matt Hardy grabbed the microphone and delivered some choice words for the couple, addressing Edge by his real name, before plugging his upcoming Ring of Honor appearance and being removed by uniform officers. The commentator said nothing during this segment and didn't acknowledge that anything out of the ordinary had happened when the show came back from commercial. Hardy's return was a slam dunk, and needless to say, people bought this hook, line, and sinker. From the shaky cam, did I really just see that backstage attack, to the utter chaos at the end, everything about this seemed realistic. Dirt sheets had speculated that Hardy's return to the company was imminent as far back as May. He'd even been directly referenced during an infamous promo by Paul Heyman during the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, which was approved by both Vince and Edge according to The Observer.
Hide your wives! It's Edge! I have 2 words for you. Matt freaking Hardy!
However, the idea was actually pitched by longtime creative team member Bruce Pritchard, who was then tasked with getting Edge and Lita to agree to work the angle. Both initially refused, understandably not wanting their private lives turned into a wrestling storyline, but an agreement was eventually reached. The Observer reported that the deal was finalized shortly before their on-screen wedding. In later interviews, Edge has stated that he realized that from the company's perspective, this feud was worth a lot of money, and he saw it as the bed he'd have to lie in. For Lita, guilt seemed to be the primary motivator, as agreeing to work with Hardy was the only way he'd be rehired by the company. This was an emotionally taxing experience for her, and she stated that it took everything she had just to get on the plane every week and go to work so Matt Hardy could keep his job. Hardy's return was kept under close secrecy, and he was hidden away from other talent that night. A car picked him up midway through the show, and Bruce Pritchard and Edge joined Hardy in the back seat to discuss the angle when he arrived. Despite the bad blood, both men shook hands and behaved professionally towards one another. 2 days later, Matt called in to Bite This, a WWE.com internet talk show hosted by Todd Grisham. Except this was 2005, so the video looked closer to this. Matt confronted Lita, and what followed was actually a fairly calm conversation with both sides making valid points. Lita claimed she'd simply fallen in love with someone else and that there was no reason for Matt to bring it public. Matt responded that he'd left the promising position on SmackDown in order to join her on Raw for the sake of their relationship, and that her heat with The Office had nearly killed his career. Echoing their previous breakup angle in 2003, he claimed that he loved her more than wrestling, but that she couldn't say the same, and that going forward, he planned to make her life miserable. Although this was a worked segment, and Lita later stated that the dismissive attitude she displayed here was the complete opposite of her true feelings. Even watching it now, almost 15 years later, it still feels like a real couple having a real argument. However, in The Observer, Meltzer noted that Lita came off like the babyface, and Matt the crazed ex-boyfriend, comparing him to Brian Pillman's loose cannon persona. He reported that there was heat on Matt after the show, as management felt he'd gone on too much about Lita dumping him, and that fans wouldn't support a guy who couldn't stop whining. The next Monday on Raw, Edge cut a scathing promo on Matt Hardy, and the internet marks obsessed with his personal life. Later that night, Matt Hardy jumped the guardrail again and attempted to attack Edge before his steel cage match with Kane. On commentary, JR referred to Hardy as simply a fan and provided no other comment. Hardy fled from security through the crowd, and Edge went on the win by escaping the cage. Kane and Edge squared off in a stretcher match the next week, which Edge also won thanks to assistance from Lita. However, Hardy struck again, attacking after the match before being restrained. On the bright side, Kane got to live out the fantasy of many divorced men as he tombstoned his ex-wife on the metal entrance ramp, then kidnapped her in the responding ambulance, and re-signing Matt Hardy, who would face Edge at SummerSlam. The original plan had actually been for Edge to take on Cena at the event, but their feud was postponed until the next year and Jericho filled the spot instead. Matt Hardy came out and cut a worked-shoot promo that completely buried the previous 9 months of television, admitting that the entire saga with Kane had been nothing but a wrestling angle. This promo, which was written by Matt himself, was roundly criticized, with one of the closing lines being especially controversial. For the previous few weeks, Hardy had been presented as a lone wolf rebel who was disrupting WWE television in order to seek revenge against the man, woman, and company that wronged him. But here he was, back as just another guy on the roster.
And the WWE can kiss my ass!
Edge responded the next week in a fiery backstage promo that was arguably one of the best of his career. He claimed that it was his idea to rehire Matt Hardy, as he saw their match at SummerSlam as an opportunity to commit legalized assault. He went on to bury Hardy's promo from the previous week, calling his lack of intensity pathetic and claiming that they weren't in the same league.
And why are you here? Because your girlfriend fell in love with a main eventer.
The match at SummerSlam began as a wild brawl on the outside, with Matt Hardy the aggressor. However, Edge took back control with a headbutt and some blows of his own before hitting a spear through the ropes, sending both men crashing to the outside. After briefly teasing a double countout, they returned to the ring, where Hardy attempted a comeback with some right hands and elbows in the corner, before being dumped by Edge headfirst into the ring post, lacerating his forehead. Ever the opportunist, Edge went to work beating Hardy senseless, pummeling him with stiff punches, knee strikes, and kicks. As Matt Hardy faded due to blood loss and could no longer defend himself, the referee had no choice but to end the match, awarding Edge the victory by knockout in 4 minutes, 50 seconds. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter awarded this match 2 stars, noting that the finish defied logic and was undermined by the Shawn Michaels Hulk Hogan match later in the night, which saw Hogan bleeding more severely without even any tease of the match being stopped. Meltzer further speculated that the match's placement on the card and Hardy not appearing on the Go Home Raw despite being backstage indicated that getting the feud over wasn't a priority for the company, as the storyline wasn't their creation. Readers were even harsher, voting the match the worst of the night. Hardy's luck went from bad to worse the next night on Raw, as he suffered a clean loss to Rob Conway, while Edge and Lita set in on commentary. Since his firing, Hardy had begun using the catchphrase,
Matt Hardy will not die!
And his character began to shift to someone who always loses, but never quits. The next week, Edge and Hardy squared off in an absolutely brutal street fight, which ended with both men falling from the entrance ramp and being removed from the arena on stretchers. Although somewhat overbooked with the electrical sparks, this was played up as legit, and Edge was actually shown crying as Lita stroked his hair. Despite the seriousness of their injuries, as luck would have it, both men recovered in time to work the next house show 4 days later, and appeared on Raw the following Monday, where Eric Bischoff announced that they'd compete in a steel cage match at Unforgiven. Hardy even had a match that night, taking on Gene Snitsky in a losing effort while Edge and Lita provided commentary. He teamed with the Big Show the next week on the Go Home Raw to take on Edge and Snitsky in yet another loss. Afterwards, Lita further humiliated Hardy by laying him out with his own finisher. Despite the losing streak, the crowd had largely stuck by Matt Hardy up to this point, admiring his tenacity and viewing him as a sympathetic babyface. However, there's a difference between falling and getting back up and then just not having what it takes in the first place. Going into Unforgiven, Hardy was definitely walking a fine line. Unforgiven 2005 originated from Oklahoma City in front of a crowd of approximately 8,000. Hardy cut a backstage promo immediately before the match, insulting Lita and denying that he still had any feelings for her, which was sort of an odd question for Todd Grisham to even ask in the first place. The match opened with a long stare down, building a big match feel that was absent from their two previous encounters. Sufficiently enraged, they locked up, but neither was able to gain the offense and they resorted to trading fists instead. Both men attempted to use the cage to no avail, and the slugfest resumed, with Hardy hitting Edge with either the greatest worked punch I've ever seen or a straight up live round that must have hurt like hell. Irish whip into the corner, and Edge used the momentum to mount an escape attempt. However, Hardy was close behind, headbutting him off the top rope and following it up with a double axe handle. Back on the ground, Hardy grabbed a headlock, which Edge countered with a bat suplex, but Hardy held on, refusing to break the hold. An Irish whip was followed by a shoulder tackle, and Hardy resumed the headlock, leaving Edge no choice but to gouge the eyes. Another escape attempt by Edge was stopped by Hardy, who then hit a very stiff clothesline, leading to the first pin attempt of this match. Back on their feet, Hardy blocked the charge in the corner and followed it up with a clothesline from the second rope. Feeding off the crowd, he attempted the twist of fate, which Edge was able to counter into the Edge-o-matic, resulting in another failed pin attempt. Frustrated and exhausted, Edge again attempted to escape the cage, leading to both men brawling on the top rope. After ramming Hardy's head into the steel border, Edge followed him down with a missile dropkick that didn't really look like it connected at all. A combination of bat suplexes left Hardy unable to stand, and Edge taunted the crowd, flashing Hardy's hand symbol before returning to punishing his nearly defenseless opponent. A DDT was followed shortly by a series of unsuccessful pin attempts, and then a power bomb into the steel cage, and another into the turnbuckle. Hardy was able to prevent a bat suplex from the middle rope, but Edge quickly recovered, delivering a devastating third power bomb that laid out both men. Edge slowly came back to life, breaking the referee's 10 count and going for the cover, but Matt Hardy survived, kicking out at 2 3/4. Disgusted, Edge began toying with his opponent. They fought their way to the corner, where Hardy connected with the snake eyes, then a side effect for a 2 count. Edge climbed towards the cage door, allowing Lita her chance to introduce the Money in the Bank briefcase, but his attack missed, and Hardy tangled Edge in the ropes, decimating him with stiff left and right hooks as the crowd became unglued. Slingshot into the cage, and Hardy ignored his opportunity for an easy victory, preferring to stay and punish his opponent. Repeated javelin throws into the steel fabric lacerated Edge's forehead, and Edge capitalized with a spear into the cage. He made another escape attempt, but Hardy recovered and executed a side effect, which Edge sold like a rag doll. Slowly, Hardy went for the cover, but Lita rushed through the door, breaking the pinfall. As she and Matt argued, Edge selfishly nearly earned a pinfall. In disbelief, Edge tried to leave the cage, but Hardy returned to his feet, bashing Edge's head against the steel. With Edge laid out below, Hardy climbed to the very top of the structure. The match at Unforgiven was awarded 4 1/4 stars in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and voted match of the night by its readers. Dave Meltzer described it as both the show saver and show stealer, and noted that while the lead drop from the top of the cage was cool, he hoped for Hardy's sake that he never did it again. It's no surprise that this was a great match. These guys built their careers wrestling each other. They didn't need to get along in order to work together. The booking of this match, which saw Matt finally triumph after so many setbacks and exposed Edge as a selfish opportunist, was perfect, and the intensity and brutality throughout the entire 20 minutes was exactly as it needed to be. Although there have been no issues while the three were working together, WWE management felt that keeping Hardy on the same roster as Edge and Lita would be too big of a distraction, and he was defeated by Edge in a loser leaves Raw ladder match 2 weeks later. The Money in the Bank briefcase was also on the line during this match. You could call this 50-50 booking, but in this case, it was really the only option. Edge was being pushed as an antagonist for Cena, and ultimately needed to go over at the end of this feud. But at the same time, Matt Hardy was walking away having lost his girlfriend and his show. If he was going to continue with the company as a featured babyface, he needed the win at Unforgiven. Most fans agreed that this angle benefited Edge immensely, and that he used the fans' hatred to become an even bigger star. He won the first of his 11 world championships just months later. He remained one of the company's top stars until his retirement in 2011 due to neck injuries. Matt Hardy had varying degrees of success in the mid-card until he was released in 2010 after being sent home from a European tour due to suspicions he was under the influence, and posting videos on his YouTube channel expressing his disinterest in remaining with the WWE. He signed with TNA in early 2011, but was released that same year due to mounting legal problems. However, he was rehired in 2014 and eventually developed the Broken Matt Hardy character, which earned widespread critical acclaim. In 2017, he made a surprise return to the WWE WWE at WrestleMania 33 and has remained with the company since then. Lita continued to manage Edge for the next year and also had 2 more runs with the WWE Women's Championship before her retirement match at Survivor Series 2006. Her decision to retire was partially based on the real-life heat generated by this angle, which had spilled over into her personal life with angry fans calling her names and attempting to shame her while out in public. For a while, the infamy of this affair kind of overshadowed Lita's accomplishments in the ring, but with the emergence of women's wrestling as a mainstream draw in North America, she's now regarded as a major influence and early pioneer of the women's movement. By all reports, the relationship between Edge and Lita was short-lived, lasting only a matter of weeks. In a later interview, Lita claimed that it was too tainted from the beginning. Despite Matt's repeated claim that Edge took away his only opportunity to ever have a family, he's now married to Rebby Sky, and they recently announced that they're expecting a 3rd son. Edge is now a father to 2 little girls and married to former women's champion Beth Phoenix. Lita was linked to special effects artist Shannon Morton, who played in her band, and was also in a relationship with CM Punk for a time. Matt Hardy eventually forgave Edge, and the two appear to have a pretty friendly relationship nowadays. Matt claimed to be on good terms with Lita from early on, and aside from an angry tweet by his wife in 2017, that seems to be generally true. The WWE managed to capture real-life drama and deliver an intense feud that the fans wanted to see. That Matt, Edge, and Lita were able to put aside their personal differences and work together to tell this story says a lot about all 3. Edge and Lita have already been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and it's almost certain that Hardy will join them when he retires. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you want to see more.